All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the second session of the day. This is about supercharging the power of your security team. I'm Brent Wagener. I am the field security specialist at GitHub in APAC. I'm based in Tokyo, Japan, but I cover the whole of APAC. My experience with application security and application development is about 20 years. I started off as a developer building security software, so software used by organizations to secure their systems, and eventually moved into software security, helping companies improve the security of their software overall. So I've seen it, the software security game for a very long time, for a couple of decades, and I'm very excited to have this conversation today. I'll hand it over to Shlomi, who is joining me today.
Hi, everyone. Shlomi. I lead the application security business unit in the region and been with GitHub for about almost 2 years. I'm based in Sydney, and I've been around software development for about 10 years and in cybersecurity, different kind of elements in cybersecurity. In my opinion, application security is the most interesting, most difficult and challenging, but the most interesting element of security. And so my remit is really to work with our customers and help them secure their software. Really, really interesting panel that we're going to have today. We'd like to keep it as an open forum and really just basically have a genuine, open discussion about some of the challenges that some of our customers have around application security, and then talk about some of the best practices that we have today. I'll hand over to Brent back to just go over some housekeeping stuff, and then we'll start the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Shlomi. So yeah, just get some of the housekeeping bits out of the way. So if you have any questions, there is a Q&A tab. There's a text Q&A, and there's a live Q&A. Let me just make sure, a video Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. The chat is for any questions you may have about how to use the system. But if you have a question about the topics that we're talking about, please use the Q&A tab. For optimal viewing, we do recommend Chrome. If you're having issues viewing it, try refreshing, try disabling your VPN, or using an incognito window. There's sort of the basic video conferencing troubleshooting steps. If you're still having trouble, under the Docs tab on the right, there is a troubleshooting guide. So please refer to that. This will be an interactive session. We do hope that we can get people up on stage with us to share their experiences. So if you want to join the video QA, go to that. You can click the raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen, and you will be in the queue. And once we've approved you, you'll be rushed onto stage. So I don't know that there's much warning if you get pulled on stage. So if you have your hand raised, be ready to come on and introduce yourself and share whatever thoughts you have. So I guess with that, I think what we want to do now is maybe just start a poll just to kind of get things kicked off. This is a fun little poll. Can you see the poll? Is it okay? Hold on. Yes, so it looks like the poll's going. So here, this is just a fun poll. Would you rather fight 10 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck? It's not application security related. I just want to make sure people are connecting and everything's working as expected. We are getting a few votes in. I'll just leave it for another 5 seconds just to see how things go. And it looks like we're about, I don't know, even. So I guess that's a good sign, Shlomi.
It's a very critical poll, Brent. Very critical question.
Yeah. So I think at least.
What would you do?
Well, me?
Out of curiosity, yeah, personally.
I don't know. I think I'd probably try the duck, the 1 horse-sized duck.
I'd probably avoid it completely, but if I had to really make a choice, probably 1 horse-sized duck.
All right. Well, thank you. So it looks like everything's working. I think we'll go to our first topic, which is just around the state of security in general. So, Shlomi, I'd just like to ask for your thoughts on, what do you think is the overall state of security, not just application security, but just in general in the cybersecurity realm market? What are your thoughts
And by the way, before I get to that, we have 28 votes to duck-sized horses, and the vast majority is horse-sized ducks. So I think that wins. But from a cybersecurity perspective, I think it's been challenging. We hear a lot about different breaches out in the media, and I still think a lot of the incidents happen due to simple phishing attacks, and so we kind of hear about that, and often that is kind of the entry into organizations. But generally speaking, cybersecurity is difficult because the attackers ultimately have a mission. They have a goal, and they have the best tools. They are well equipped. They have really good knowledge around what they need to do. And ultimately, they have to be right only once. They have unlimited attempts, and once is enough for them to get in, where the defenders have a much harder challenge on their hands. They have to basically deal with organizational processes and all the technical debt and the legacy applications that they have to have, and deal with other different departments. And they need to move much faster, and also have the daily pressures. And plus, they have to deal with whatever they have already. So lack of people, often lack of kind of process and knowledge, and also lack of tools, or maybe way too many tools that are just not talking to each other. And they have to be right every single time. And so that's a really difficult thing for customers. But I think there's some breakthroughs, especially with AI coming into the mix, that could potentially help tip the scale more towards defenders.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. So the limited resources, I think that's something I've seen since, for many years. I mean, forever. And, particularly around cybersecurity, I think a lot of the resources have been going to more of the reactive side of cybersecurity. So incident response and security operations centers, monitoring tools. And I think a lot of organizations have a lot of good visibility on their overall environments and security posture. But, I do think that not as much has been spent on the application security side, or more proactive type of services. Sorry. So I would just...
and one more thing, I think I mentioned phishing attacks, and again, application security is very, very difficult. It's probably very challenging, but still, phishing attacks is the easy way in. For those who don't know, we've actually just made it mandatory to use multi-factor authentication to help reduce, I guess, the chance of it. It doesn't mean that it's eliminated, and you still need to think before you provide credentials or before you click on something, but that's a step forward to try and secure the platform itself. But from an application security perspective, that's a really difficult element, right, Brent? I mean, you've been trying to do it yourself.
What about application security specifically? Because that's really what we're here to talk about. So what do you see is the state of application security today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And largely, to be fair, I mean, I've been in application security probably for about 10 years. We're still dealing with the same challenges. We still see some of the same issues that we've seen 10 years ago. It's just that today, the velocity of software is much faster. We deal with a lot of more partners. There's a lot more APIs. There's a lot more software that is being developed, and much faster as well. And the solutions, I guess, that we came up with over the last 10 years haven't really changed much. It's been, let's put a developer through some training upfront when we onboard them for 4 or 5 hours. Usually they just click next, and then hopefully they retain some of it. And then, don't get me wrong, it's really important, but the challenge is once you actually do that, often they're going back into kind of the day-to-day activities, and they have to deal with engineering whilst they have to deal with milestones and all this stuff. And so that becomes really difficult. And then finally, we kind of run some security tools often after the fact, and we tell the engineers that they haven't done the right thing. And so I think that is a challenge. And honestly, we need a bit better way. We need a different way. That's one of the challenges that I see. The other challenge is that a lot of engineers are just flooded with a lot of alerts and a lot of issues. And so when it becomes really overwhelming, you really don't know what you need to do. What's your thoughts, Brent, on that?
Yeah, I think the first time I implemented an application security program is for a bank about a little over 10 years ago. And I just remember we were going through the software development lifecycle and implementing controls, for requirements gathering, making sure that everybody knows you need to have strong, access management controls and threat modeling for the architecture design part of the application lifecycle. And the big thing, and I think the thing that stuck, was penetration testing during the testing phase, and then maintaining after it's already been put into production. But I think the one area that never really got that much attention was the coding part. And I think at the time it was mainly because of tools. The tools just weren't as mature as they needed to be. There were a lot of false positives. Developers just basically said no to all of them. And I actually think that a lot of the organizations I see today are kind of still in that same phase. They do sort of risk-based penetration testing for their most critical applications. They may do some sort of like outsourced code reviews, or maybe some limited code reviews. But I think the code controls, the code level controls, there's still a lot of room for improvement. I think we had somebody pop up on the video QA, if I'm correct. I just want to remind, if anybody's interested in coming on up and sharing your thoughts about any of the topics we're talking about, specifically now about application security, please raise your hand. All right, so we have Cole Cornford.
Hello,
hey.
Can everyone hear me? Hey, how are you all going?
Yes, could you introduce yourself and tell us your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm Cole Cornford. I'm the founder of an application security consultancy in Sydney, Australia. So been around the bush for a little bit, helps folk out with building application security programs across governments and telcos and big banks and so on around Australia. So yeah, happy to jump on and give some thoughts. So I think the topic we're talking about, Shlomi, was about what are we seeing as the current state of AppSec, right?
Correct. Yeah. What's your thoughts? I mean, Cole, you mentioned that you work, I guess, with different customers. What do you see kind of is the main challenges in AppSec today? And what would you recommend, I guess, some of the audience that are listening today?
Yep. So I think there's like basically two kind of ecosystems that we operate with a lot, is the startup and scale up ecosystem and the big enterprise ecosystem. And I think they both have very different challenges, because the startup scale up ecosystem is how do we enable ourselves to be secure while also getting to market quickly and not wasting time on, all these other things that we need to care about. And I think the good thing about that kind of ecosystem is platform engineering patterns, having a paved road, all those kind of approaches that you see over in the US, they work really well there. You can't take those kind of approaches and put them into a big enterprise scenario. So I think that if the real area within Australia that's really problematic is how do we go about dealing with big companies that have large legacy tech bases and moving them onto a DevOps journey so they can start implementing AppSec controls throughout the SDLC.
So what you're saying is the challenge is how do we shift them left? I mean, everyone's talking about shift left these days. Do you think that kind of works well these days? What's the way to kind of help do that when you have to deal with so much technical debt out there?
Yeah. So I find shifting left it's a bit overused lately. Back in the day when we're talking shift left, it was always like, if you fix something early, then it's going to be like so much cheaper to fix it than like later on in the life cycle, right? But we're in a world where DevOps enables us to be deploying code like 20 to 30 times per day, right? So if you're doing something like that, the cost of making a change is actually pretty small overall, right? So the cost benefit of shifting to the left for a lot of these things is not that much. But at the same time, I also think that if you shift too far to the left, then you're basically slowing engineers down and making them focus on like tool results and stopping them from being able to, just build features proactively. So I'm a big fan of when we do think about the concept of shift left, thinking about architectural patterns and like creating pathways for people to move forward with, that like a paved road on getting the yes. That's what I think. If you have to move off of this road, then you need to think about, it's going to be slow, it's going to be bumpy, you're going to have all of these different types of security checks in place. But if you stay on the road, that's the highway. Let's get you to prod. And I'm seeing a lot of the bigger institutions think about, how do we get there? I know that GitHub certainly enables that with Actions and the GitHub Advanced Security Suite. But yeah, it's an interesting journey. It's good to go along this way from what I've seen in the past, where we've got stage gates blocking everyone moving the prod.
So I just want to summarize kind of what I'm hearing. What you're saying really is, it's okay to talk about shift left, but really you need to be careful to have the right balance. If you do it too late in the process, you're going to find stuff too late, and you're not going to really be able to affect it. And eventually, basically, I've been in multiple meetings where you have to go to production, and really the only option that you have is either accept the risk or accept the risk, because the alternative is you just delay the whole project, etc. And so that kind of happens. Or you have to balance that with, do you actually distract developers with too much stuff to do? So that's a big challenge. I want to do a poll.
I'm just going to cut in before we do the poll. I'll get one more person up on stage. We've got Peter waiting, so I'll bring him up, and then let's do the poll. Yeah,
let's do that. Excellent.
Hello, Peter.
G'day, how we doing?
Great. Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name's Peter Freiberg, application security consultant, also from Australia. So I know Cole and Shlomi for a bit of a time, but worked in a lot of banking and large corporates, rolling out AppSec programs, focused around automation and so forth. So I thought I'd probably piggyback on some of those topics, and if that works for you guys.
Yeah, great. Thanks for joining. Shlomi, just which poll did you want to pull up? I'll put it up on screen.
One question that I think one question that I always had a challenge with in application security is, who's really more responsible for application security? Is engineering or security? Now, obviously, in a ideal world, we want to do both. Both of them, everyone is responsible for it, or just like our CISO says, everyone basically is on the security team. But if you had to choose one, who would it be? So we've opened the poll. Who should be more responsible for application security?
So we have developers or the security team. It's a pretty tight race so far.
And Brent, I'm going to try and share this poll. Let me see what's going on. There you go. We can actually see it developing as well.
I missed that button on the last poll.
There you go. We're 50-50. Oh, it's developers. Let's give it a few more seconds.
Shlomi, it might be more interesting to see, if something goes wrong, who goes to jail? The developers, the company owners, the business owner, and then that might skew this result too.
Well, the question is if anyone is going to go to jail, or I guess who's going to lose out, who's going to miss out. Ultimately, yep. Unfortunately, it's a lot of times it's the customers, and I guess shareholders potentially. But yeah, unfortunately at that point in time it's too late.
No, understood.
All right, let's close the poll. Very interesting. So developers should be more responsible for application security. That's very interesting. What do you guys think about it? Is that representative of what you see kind of when you guys talk to customers?
Who's that addressed to? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll let Peter answer this.
Cole, what do you think about it?
So I think this is interesting. In my experience, a lot of engineers just say straight away that this is a security responsibility, because security should be outlining what we need to do as engineers, the policies, the procedures, and the processes that we need to follow so that we build applications in a secure way. And I tend to agree with them. But the problem we have in the market at the moment is that very few security professionals are trained software engineers. So what ends up happening is the security team comes back with a 50-page report saying, here are the secure coding standards, go read them, and then don't make any mistakes. and the dev teams come back and say, no, I'm just going to go run a couple of static analysis tools and try my best. And neither group is happy with each other, because the security people feel like they're not being listened to because they're used to compliance and audits and having standards to follow. And the devs are feeling like security is blocking them and slowing them down. So the thing I like to see is when you get security folk who are trained software engineers as either satellite resources in teams, or at least working within a platform or security function to build components that engineers consume. Because if you are building a logging framework as a security team and you tell all your engineering teams that they have to use this logging, it goes back to that paved road idea, right? If you've got an authentication function that's built by a software engineering security team and everyone must use this, then you know that ultimately this is the responsibility of the security team to provide a really important piece of infrastructure. And as a developer, you don't need to stress about knowing all this kind of stuff, right? But at scale, this is really difficult to do. And you'll see a mishmash of solutions all over the place because of it.
So I guess security champions. Peter, have you seen that work? I guess putting security champions, I guess, in engineering teams. Is this something that works in practice in large organizations?
I think when you say large organization, it's not at an organization level, it's at a team level, or maybe even a division level that this sort of works at. So I think when you say a large organization, if they've got 5,000 developers, it's unrealistic to think you're going to uplift 5,000 people at the same time. So I think just to go on what Cole's saying, there are different aspects when we talk about application security. If you say you should be logging, then you need a centralized logging platform for developers to consume and use. But they might not be able to spin that up themselves. So there's one aspect there. But coming back to, I guess, the developer and the security champions, I think there's actually a crossover. I think Cole mentioned this before. If you've got a really good tech lead, they will understand the technical impacts of security. So uplifting someone like that to understand it, you don't necessarily need to have a security champion. It may be that your good tech leads are already that person. So how do you actually collaborate with them? And that's maybe more of the SME approach, that you've got someone who's really good at code reviews working with tech leads. And I don't think you necessarily need to define them explicitly that you've got a security champion. You've just got someone who can liaise with SMEs as you need it. And thinking of it almost in a database mode, not everyone in a team needs to understand performance of database queries, but you need to be able to know that it's a thing and then who to talk to when you need to understand that or when issues come back. Same thing with probably unit testing. Not everyone needs to be great at building unit tests, but you need people in the team who can do that. So I think it's looking at the cross-functional capabilities you require, but less around labeling it, because we don't say you've got a performance management champion. We don't say you've got a user experience champion, but we seem to think that in security you need it, but they're actually just skills you need in a team. And whether that's in your team specifically, or whether it's a hub and spoke model where you've got someone you can actually relate to. So that's why it's tricky, because you go, a team might be awesome in one division, same technology stack somewhere else with different management, different motivations, may actually have a completely different security outcome based on that team's capability. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Shlomi, other than it depends a little bit on the company, but I think it's actually focusing on the capabilities versus a specific label, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Guys, I'm sorry to jump in. I'm going to add another person to the stage, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say, before you introduce yourself, just say, people are waiting on the video Q&A. I am keeping my eye on it. So I'm just looking for a good time to jump in. So that's all.
Before we continue, if this is really ideally, we want to have way more people and just open it up for conversation. So really glad that you guys are coming on board. Rishan, please introduce yourself, where you're from, and what do you want to tell?
Yeah. So hi, this is Rishabh here. I work as a DevSecOps enablement team. I work with the DevSecOps enablement team in Roche. So my points here, just to add on to this, is that I completely agree with Cole and Peter when they say that security team is better when they have a more software development background. But also to add to that, nowadays in the current infrastructure, most of the let's take login for an example, right? Most of the teams are using different SSO platforms like Azure AD, Ping Federate, and what that does is it takes out the main responsibility of the security team to maintain those things, and rather sends it out simply for the developers to integrate it. So that's where nowadays most of the security part and the application platform security as well, which is moving towards SaaS, is like it's gradually decreasing the responsibilities and giving more in hands of the developers to work on rather than the security team to maintain.
I have a question from the Q&A for the panel here, somewhat related. This is from N. Stevens. How do you go about challenging business stakeholders' poor understanding of security best practices when you're implementing security features? I'll just throw that out there. This is from the audience.
Honestly, after so I'll do something short, and then I'll let you guys also add onto it. But so I've been doing security hands-on. I started actually in security hands-on, and then I've done probably about 10 or 12 years for the last 12 years working with different customers about it. And this is probably one of the number one challenges in our industry. A lot of people are coming from security. They love kind of the area. They love the technology. They love the element. But often we lack the ability to communicate clearly what is the value of security. And it's difficult. And everyone knows what the value of security when something happens. When you have a breach, it's easy. It's kind of like going to a dentist when you already have a root canal. When you have a lot of pain, it's easy to communicate what's the value of going to a dentist. But if you don't, and it's challenging. So I think we all need to get better at explaining what are the ramifications of not doing enough of the controls. And and also basically being really clear to, I think, the board members and down, what are the activities that we can do within reason to reduce that risk? That's my kind of thought process. Rushan, do you have any thoughts about this?
Yes. So my thoughts here is in the last 2 years, I have seen an increasing trend in terms of addressing security. So even though stakeholders might not be very well aware of what the technicalities are in security, I see a change in this trend where they are trying to empower people to take over the security work and to bring out some results there. But definitely, I am seeing a change with the new. I mean, it feels like there's a more better trend to understand and to try to improve security, whereas as it was like 2 years ago. So as we started at the very start, that Cole said, shift left is a very catchy term these days, and everyone wants to be a part of it. But then it doesn't necessarily mean that they can help, but it would equally mean that they are helping if they empower people who can actually take on these security tasks.
Peter, what's your thoughts? I mean, I know you've worked with a number of organizations to help them figure out how to get more stakeholders to approve and also put the funding around application security. What would you recommend customers when they're thinking about, or people when they're thinking, how do I actually go and get more funding to put more people in application security and get more education, more tooling? What would you recommend them to do?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things which are unfortunate realities. I've seen a lot of programs be kicked off by breaches. So the funding comes, like you said, after the fact. Something bad's happened. How do we stop that from happening again? I think a lot of compliance falls into that bucket. I think competitive analysis is something that we've seen too. So the open source dependency check sort of stuff that came in the last few years, I think there was our competitors are doing this to manage their risk, but we are not. So there was a little bit market competition going on as well, that what should be there. And I think those types of things can help. On the actual rollout, and if people don't have specific funding, unfortunately, mandates still work. Like a policy says X, the CISO says everyone should be doing this by 6 months' time. And I think that drives the behaviors for organizational rollout. I think back to Cole's thing before, when you talk about shift left, early adopters will always do this. They'll always grab the latest tech, make their process better. Then you've sort of got that early majority, or what is the early adopters, and then the the middle, and then you've got laggards. And I think it's important to look at that not everyone is DevOps. So how do you roll out for different modes of delivery, but with different, if you like, focuses on how they actually deploy code? So if someone's still doing annual maintenance releases, it's very hard to get them to uptake new ways of working. So mandates are good, but just bearing in mind that might take a year or two. And then I think the other thing, back to your point, Shlomi, about funding, it is really about looking at what's cost effective to get that outcome. And I think we are seeing a lot of platform consolidation. Don't buy 5 tools, buy one. That's a common thing now. How do we actually add security onto existing tooling if we've got it, like dev tools? But then also, again, just trying to understand what's reasonable for your industry. And hopefully that drives it too.
We have a new addition to the panel, Anoop. If you could just jump in and give an intro and maybe your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah, I'm from Wipro. I'm handling DevSecOps for the internal enterprise, GitHub, Azure DevOps. It's a very large enterprise platform that I'm handling. Shift left is what I was interested in, and I wanted to jump in there. We do, SAST, DAST, end-to-end in CI/CD pipelines. We are trying to, because we have a large platform, we try to adapt as much as possible. On the shift left side, I do agree with Cole. There are plus and minuses on when we do that. But for a larger enterprise, when we have, in the same vertical, 700, 800,000 developers, which are under one security group, okay? What I wanted to just point out when I wanted to come into this discussion was on the lighter side, you gave an option of the responsibility of developers and security team. We should have a third option, tools and processes. Right. So the tools like automation on the pipelines and that should be there. It should be mandatory. That's one thing. People try to jump lines, okay, by saying things are delaying, which Cole might have tried to say that, okay, developers are not really, might be getting out of focus on developing features and then trying to do these additional things. But that is required, okay, as part of the security. That is one thing. Second thing is, if real simple shift lefts are done, like, moving from SAST scanning on the pipelines, then to have IDs, integration, and, on every commit and things like that, that will resolve a lot of problems. 80% of real, I'm not talking about false positives, but the real vulnerabilities will be resolved at that side. So I just wanted to ask Cole again on that part of your thought. I'm not saying that I'm against this. I actually wanted it to adapt, but I know there is a balance between how much left shift you can do, and not just left shift. I'm a little new to the term left shift. I just know that it has to be done early. So what are some more ideas about left shift and early mitigation of the risk is what I wanted to ask. And this is my take, because we are doing it at a very large enterprise. Okay, we are now adapting GitHub. We have done tons of migration very recently. So I'm the best audience for you, actually.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that if you want, Shlomi.
Yeah. I'm just going to basically say one thing, and then I'll pass on to you, Cole. I think, look, on paper, it's a great idea. Why don't we do everything on the IDE? In reality, what we find is that if you do a lot of scanning on the IDE, one, you don't have a lot of context, and two, you might throw so many things on the developer, and you're going to distract them. And ultimately, think about it this way. If you had to choose, if I'm an engineer, and anyone can maybe disagree with me, but if I'm an engineer, my first priority is to cut code that is going to work. And sometimes I'm cutting code that is not even, it's not production. I'm just doing a POC. So if I worry about security first, it's just not realistic. My first priority is get the functionality right, make something that works. Now, if you're running it in the IDE, you might distract the developer. Eventually, they're going to basically lose interest. So I think it just needs the right balance. That's the challenge. Cole, what do you think? Like IDE scanning, does that actually work? And is there maybe an alternative to it?
Yeah. So I'm a fan of, instead of using like automated tools to find vulnerabilities, addressing a vulnerability class with good design early on. So an example would be, let's say we have cross-site scripting keeps coming up in our bug bounty programs or in our static analysis results or our pen tests or whatever. It just keeps happening. We can teach developers about how to fix it, or we can force them to use React. And by creating these, basically saying you need to use this library, and if you're deviating from this road, then you're at risk for introducing cross-site scripting when previously you wouldn't be. So I'm a fan of targeting a vulnerability class instead of using a lot of IDE scanners. And I think of IDE scanners as something that's like, the good static analysis tools take a very long time to run because the way that they operate takes a lot of CPU cycles. And also they're not very good at being able to do partial analysis of code results, right? They usually try to take the entire ecosystem. I don't think that that's very helpful. If like an engineer is trying to do something and then they want to run a scan to see if they've introduced a security flaw. And even if you try to use the more simpler ones that aren't as, exact, they're going to just find a lot of false positives and noise. And if you're an engineer and you have 1,000 things pop up saying that you got tabs here instead of spaces, next to it is you're using parameterized queries in the wrong place, and then you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to have alert fatigue, and that scares a lot of people, and they just don't want to participate in that. So yeah, you can introduce these in CI itself. And I think that shifting left, it does make a lot of sense if you choose like the right types of technologies that mitigate entire classes. But if we're going to be looking at using IDE scanning, I would make sure that you have an AppSec expert jump in. And the very first thing they're going to be doing is tuning the scanner for the environment that the engine is operating in, so that what they get is high signal vulnerabilities. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Of course, go for it.
To this topic, yes, what you're saying is correct, but there's always a fight between the engineer and the people who are identifying false positives and so on. I'll give my example wherein, when the vulnerability scan happens, there are thousands of false positives just because there are library version restrictions and so on. As an example, we use Angular, in many of the applications in the front end. And there are certain libraries which cannot be upgraded, just at that point of time or for some time, Then there is a tussle between these two parties on whether it can go, it can be marked as a risk. So this is the point wherein I was saying if this was a shift left, and it could have been understood at the beginning and there was a compromise. As you said, the tool can be taught a little bit better. Again, I would ask a practical example how to teach the tools a little bit more, to identify less false positives or something, because that is the biggest problem. Sorry if I'm extending that, but this is my main problem.
Peter has some input on that.
10,000 vulnerabilities, and only 8,000 of them are not even relevant. Sorry.
No, thanks for that. I think Peter has some input on that. Sorry.
Yeah, just I guess there's a few things, because I've heard the false positive argument for as long as I've been using SaaS tools, which is 15 years, right? So I think it's accurate in some ways, but there's probably a few things we need to think about. One, consider the scope of what you actually want to scan and look at. I remember asking this for one of the banks I worked with. What would actually cause a Sev1 incident? Command injection, SQL injection are probably it. So if you want to ignore a whole lot of other bunches of classes, which is what Cole was talking about before, start your process on your minimum gate is we should have reviewed and actually tuned the results for 2 vulnerability classes that are heavy hitters. That's what the developers can then focus on. And your security team, if they're doing some sort of analysis, can look at the broad amount of it. Some of the tools used to do this. They had a developer view, and then they had the security auditor view. So this has been around for a little while. So figure out what is actually most important for you. And some of the customers we worked with, we had triage guidelines. You're a tier 1 app. You should triage these vulnerability classes And then once you've done that, they will not appear in the next scan because you've already triaged them and there's comments as to whether that's a false positive or not. So it is a bit painful, but that's one thing around the false positives. The other one I wanted to talk about IDE tools as well. Having worked in organizations with massive diversity of tech stack, not all IDEs are supported. And also going on what Cole said, if you've got an old tech stack and it's running, I don't know, I've worked on applications that are classic ASP for 10 years, you can't use a newer developer IDE and you can't use a newer framework unless you're redeveloping the whole stack. So there are sometimes you just have to deal with that. So, and it's not right nor wrong. And the other probably last point, sorry, so there's a comment there from Sharp, is there are some things that are vulnerable but not exploitable. And this comes into your risk triage process. You may have a library that is vulnerable. You mentioned that before with either Angular or so on. Are you using a vulnerable method, which would then make it exploitable? And that's part of your risk management process. There is no silver bullets with this, but there is a bit of process for then assigning and tracking things that could be an issue, and then being able to track what is not an issue for this release. And that, I think, is where a lot of the tools have suffered from being able to put that fidelity around that information to actually, have a release rather than it's a risk. So that's my 35 cents worth.
Thanks. I think on this topic, we'll give Rishabh the last word and move on to the next topic.
Yeah. So just to add my small point into it, the most of the important points and the reasons why we enable IDE scanning is not primarily to understand the vulnerabilities to the maximum. It's more about having some set standards around the code quality, right? If you can always have a set of library detection, whereas you know what to use and what not to use. But then also, it's good to introduce security in IDE, but it should always be in a balance that not everything needs to be done. Rather, if you even maintain small things like maintaining the right amount of scanning for, say, certain amount of libraries that you're not meant to use, or if there is some sort of coding standard that the team or the enterprise sets. And when I'm talking about enterprise, I'm talking about people in enterprise that have, say, thousands of developers. The more better coding standard you have, the easier it is for in future in the steps to identify the security. So it's good to have IDE scanning as long as you can keep it controlled and not let it disturb the normal pace of the developers. But at some point you do have to have standards which are specific to how the company wants to proceed with its code base.
Thank you. Just moving on to the next topic, I want to talk about secrets. So Shlomi, I think this is a fast growing attack vector. I think it might even be the largest attack vector. And we see more and more stories about public secrets being publicly available and compromised. So, could you talk a little bit about, the state of this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think recently I've mentioned it in one of the other security forums that we had. But if you look at a lot of the breaches out there, they're not using very sophisticated, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, etc. Even though it does happen, it's much easier to log in and steal credentials and log into infrastructure. And obviously, when you put username and password, you can use a MFA, and so that there are ways to at least try and protect with it. But secrets in the code is something that is easy for attackers, or it yields a high return on the investment that they're going to make. And so it's enough that a developer is going to go and clone the repo into a public repo by mistake, or because they want to work on it at home, not maliciously, just as an accident, or in fact, not even by accident. They just want to do their job, and it's just an easier way for them to do it. But then the repo has, unfortunately, a secret, whether it is an API key for AWS or Azure, etc. And once you do that, and the attacker has that API key, it's almost game over. We've seen it, for example, in the Uber attack, which was not in that way, but the attacker used basically a phishing attack. There was a multi-factor authentication, actually, and they used a multi-factor authentication exhaustion attack on one of the suppliers. Once the attacker managed to get in, they found the PowerShell script, which really is that kind of code that your developers are writing? No, it's kind of one of your system admins may be using. And in that PowerShell script, it had a token to the privilege access management solution. So that is really critical, and the impact is going to be huge. So I think that is a big challenge. And to tie it back to kind of a little bit about the question before about IDEs, my personal opinion, and I think that's a little bit of the direction, I guess, where GitHub is going, is to start building in security controls as part of your development lifecycle by introducing those kind of things into things like Copilot. So as an example, GitHub Copilot now has a way to look at and try and identify certain hard-coded passwords, so that when the developer is writing, think about it like almost like a personal assistant, where they actually help the developer identify those issues before you even put it into a commit or push it into the repository. So that's my personal kind of opinion of ID scanners versus something else. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I think hopefully two quick ones. So one thing I've seen a couple of breaches and compromises are forking of repos across things. So forks are public and they remain public, then people actually change a config file and put a password in it, right? So that's and people just don't think about it when it's happened. So I've seen that a couple of times. They forked it for some reason, just forgetting the context of it's remaining public, right? So there's a little bit of just understanding that, and that's also part of how you might configure your repos. Do you even allow forking? So there's some setup there. The other one too is around, we talk about patterns, but in large orgs, it's like, where do you store secrets? So, yeah, some people will have the AWS stuff. There's the GitHub secret stuff. They might have HashiCorp Vault. There could be platform-specific things. And I think that's where, back to Cole's blessed path is like, here is 3 ways of actually storing secrets. And I think the stuff that you're talking about, Shlomi, is do we have push protection so the secret never makes it into the repo? If it is in the repo, do we know how to actually check that it's now not compromised? Was that production? Do we have a process around it? So there's quite a few parts to that whole secrets piece around stopping it from getting there, fixing it when it is there, and then where should we put it in the actual correct way so that we've actually got a good practice for actually managing secrets in our app.
Rishab, you had a...
Yeah, so just to add there, it's fun to talk about this topic because this was one of the topics that we were recently tackling in our organization as well. And the thing about secrets, and this is also for the audience who is here, the thing about secrets is if you add it to a commit and if it somehow reaches the internet, there's no way for you to go and change back the history. So the only way to tackle that is to revoke the tokens or the passwords that you already have. Now, again, I completely like the idea where GitHub is working on the code never or the secret never making it to the repo, which is very important because I mean, most of our organization's bug bounties are also from these secrets, right? And we do have some really good stories. I'm not sure how much of it I can tell, but of where a secret which was never meant to be published, and surprisingly, it was, again, it's not always malicious. Rather, it's more of a common mistake. So these guidelines which are put in, and especially with the push protection and things, it's really good because it's one of the most it's not primarily a mistake, but it's more of a easily done mistake that is happening throughout the tech industry. So it's not only in one organization, but it's happening throughout. And as Peter said, we need to set guidelines on where to store, so that people know from the very beginning that, okay, this is where the secret should go. Because if every team wants to store a secret in some different place, then again, it brings down to the fact that someone by mistake will put it on the code. So as long as there is a good set standard in an organization that we use this one tool to store secret, it makes it easier. But yeah, I mean, it's one of the things that even if you're starting now in your organization, I'm sure there would be at least 100+ tokens that are out there that we need to identify first and revoke, which of course we are doing as well.
All right, thank you for that input. Shlomi, did you have something?
No, that's
I thought maybe you're...
great comment. I don't know if Cole, if you want to add anything. Otherwise, there's quite a few more topics that we can actually go through.
I'll keep it pretty quick. I think that with secrets and credential exposure, the very first thing most organizations really need to do is just understand the risk. And if you have parity between each of your environments, then you wouldn't have so much, like, the likelihood of introducing secrets is going to be very low. But what we find, at least in a lot of our assessments, is that people will be hard coding secrets for dev and test environments because it's easy. And then that ends up in prod because there's no parity between it. So I think secrets management comes back to just making good pragmatic decisions early on and having a standard approach to how to manage secrets. Now, and what happens if you have secrets everywhere? Well, you got to go through and find them, test them, and then work out whether they are going to be publicly exposed and whether you can rotate them. It's not easy to just go into a system and just start changing those secrets because you'll cause production outages all over the place, right? So it's something that, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, the next topic, developer security team collaboration. Sorry, did you have a?
Brent, you know what? Why don't we actually have a poll question on it? Let's see what the audience think about that. So we have the secret scanning one, and it is.
So, around secret scanning, do you want to do the poll around secret scanning?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what the audience think.
I'll open that up and share. So we have, what is the biggest reason for hard-coded secrets? It's easy, lack of awareness, or other. Wow.
I guess, do people understand what the problem with storing secrets in config files is? Because that's probably a good thing to actually highlight, because a lot of developers may not understand what the risk is. So,
yeah,
I would go back to a lot of organizations I've worked in, they haven't had a choice. It's like, I don't have, like, if you think pre-AWS secret storage or GitHub secrets, where did you put them? It was in the ops team who actually then put the credentials in the payload for production. So I think there's actually a design pattern issue here, depending on when, which goes back to the easy thing. But I think when an app was built 10 years ago, it's a different conversation to if you built an app today.
I can tell you now that when we started with secret scanning as an example to offer it, and organizations implemented it, what we found is that initially, even though we scanned for secrets and we identify those, we found that people didn't actually fix it. And when we went back and started doing a poll and basically surveys with the people, as you look, we told you kind of even in the push protection that you're about to enter a secret into your code, about to push it. Why did you not kind of get rid of it? And the answer was, we actually didn't know how to fix it. So exactly to what you're saying, Peter, often people know that they probably shouldn't do it, but they don't know what the right way is. And so interestingly enough, in the secrets, we kind of now starting to put some guidelines. So at least when it tells you that you're about to push a secret into the code, it will give you some high-level guideline, which can be edited, but at least it gives the developer some form of, I guess, awareness at that point in time of what is it that they need to do to not make that mistake. So we're trying to make it easy for them to do the right thing. And I think that is really kind of the crux of application security. It's about what I'm seeing is developers want to do the right thing, but if you make it easy for them and when you don't add too much friction, they'll do the right thing. But if they don't know and you make it hard, of course they won't do it. So interesting results. Let's close this lack of awareness, and then it's easy. I think it's a combination of things together, but lack of awareness seems to win by a mile. Cool, very very interesting. So let's see what other topics do we want to talk about?
I think we have time for one more topic. I'll let you choose, Shlomi. Go.
So we can talk about developer education, or how do we collaborate between the developer team and security? What do you guys think would be making a more interesting topic?
They interrelate, those two.
let's talk about that. Peter, what do you think? What's the challenge around those topics, like the collaboration and then developer education?
Okay, so I think it was touched on before. Collaboration is usually two very different domains. So does your security person know the tech stack that you're trying to develop and deploy? And does the developer actually understand the security implications of maybe privacy regulations or the types of authorization mechanisms? So there is a domain between the two. I do think this is just how people interact. I think sometimes people get frustrated in organizations. So we look at tech skills a lot in people, but good communication skills are kind of paramount to having good collaboration between those two teams. And I think some shared goals. It's the collaboration versus the criticism. That's what we really need to, I think, focus on when we're sort of building good relationships between security and development teams. Where I want to just quickly touch on with the education is I think there's lots of opportunities for education. So we've seen formalized training. That's cool. There's different training platforms, online training platforms. I think security tools provide just-in-time training. I found a bug. This has told me that I've got a file path traversal vulnerability. I've never heard of that before. Here's what it is. Here's how to fix it. It's very contextual. It's to the problem of the code I've got, not something that I learned 3 months ago that I've probably forgotten. So I think that's the tool usage. If they work well, they can provide education there. And then for domain-specific stuff is when you get the collaboration, like a pen test had found something where an OAuth token was logged and it was part of how the developer implemented some sort of function, then that's something that I think is a good collaboration so someone can understand what that looks like. So good collaboration and communication helps between the security and development teams. And there's quite a few feedback loops to the developer on how they can better understand what can go wrong. That's my thoughts.
Rishabh, what do you think? Like, have you had to deal with that in your organization around developer education?
Yes. So yes, we did. And the way how we tackled it in our organization is primarily through having some cross-training sessions where the developers and the security team, we have them sit together, and the security team sometimes explain the processes that they go through. The developers explain sometimes the processes that they go through. So the reason for this is to make the other team understand what are the processes that in general either the developers or the security team follow. So exactly like continuing on the point of that Peter was saying, it's more about educating the teams about what are the impacts and what are the processes that the other teams follow. Like if there has been a security, say, vulnerability, so instead of only pointing it out, some of these sessions are targeted towards how this vulnerability was found and what could be the impact, and explaining it a bit more in detail to the developers. Whereas this could also be like an interactive session where the developers also explain that during the development, why was this action chosen? Just so that it's not to point a blame at anyone, but just to understand the point of view. So this is more about education and bringing the teams together. Like the better the developers and the security team understand each other and work well with each other, it's easier for the stakeholders and the management to not have to get in between and work more like enforce things rather than it's better to bring out the harmony than to enforce the things.
Thank you. We have about 1 minute left, so I guess we'll give it to Cole for the last, or Shlomi.
I'll be
go for it, and then I wanted to just kind of round up something about kind of the developer education side, but Cole, go for it, and
I'll be nice and quick. So I think there's a few things. Is the getting to yes. I like to start with that kind of model when we're talking to development teams. Traditional security is usually about, hey, what you're doing is a bit silly. We can't have it happen here, right? And instead, I want to flip that around and say, like, we want to get you to, like, we know you want to achieve this. How do we get you to yes? And that means that you're building collaboration into like your entire workflow, and people want to work with each other because there's a shared goal that you're trying to achieve. So I think that that's really important. As for the developer education stuff, if you keep that lens in mind, you have to think about the customer experience of engineers so they can get to yes. And what abstraction can you provide as a security trainer so that they can get to yes as well? And I don't like targeting vulnerability classes. I don't like doing the top 10. I don't like talking about specific bits and pieces. And the reason simply is that knowledge is not retained for a long period of time, and it's not contextually relevant to them right now. So I'm a fan of instead having us be accessible for engineers so that they're willing to come to us and learn with us. So shared Slack channels, regular lunch and learn sessions where they can ask the AppSec team anything, and just giving them a good customer experience so they actively seek out professionals instead of going and trying to find stuff themselves, right?
Thanks. I think we're pretty much on time, so we might wrap up. Brent, do you want to bring up the last slide?
Sure. Let me just, I'll just go through the wrap up, and then Shlomi, I'll hand it over to you for the last word.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, thank you everyone. That was an excellent panel. Lots of great input. Very appreciative of everybody that participated. This is the final session for the second day around security. Please tune in tomorrow for 2 sessions around collaboration. We'll be talking in the first session on how to increase developer productivity by investing in more efficient tooling, and then in the afternoon about streaming your DevOps tool chain. Thank you everyone again for joining. Please take some time to take the session survey. Just follow the QR code at the bottom right of the screen. And over to you, Shlomi, for your final thoughts.
Yes, final thoughts. Really, I know application security can be challenging, but I think if you looked at some of the stuff that is coming out, for example, with GitHub Copilot X, I think there are things that from a technology point of view can help engineers make the right decisions and then free up the application security team to really work with the engineers on the kind of the harder stuff and on collaboration. So watch this space, but yeah, I'm pretty excited. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you very much for joining us on this session.